We're still on the subsection of intersections, traffic lights, and oncoming vehicles. In this video, we're covering the various scenarios that give rise to hiding or obscuring vehicles in an intersection. I've got 9 animations with real-life clips that accompany them, as well as a fair number of clips that make up the montage section to follow these instructional videos. And the reason why there's so much material is because this is a very common occurrence, hence the multitude of clips that I have to choose from. In the first animation, what we have is a larger vehicle in the intersection waiting to turn, and because of its size, tends to block or obscure more any vehicles that are approaching on the far side of the intersection. So we'll see that in the animation. The driver of the red vehicle gets closer, and because of the size of the vehicle that's intervening between itself and the oncoming vehicle, this driver doesn't see the oncoming vehicle and now crosses over the intersection only to result in a collision. In the real life clip, we've got this larger vehicle waiting to turn through the intersection, some approaching vehicles a little bit in the distance there. For this driver, he cannot see these vehicles, and so he should be extra cautious in progressing through the intersection because of his lack of visibility, either to be able to see these drivers or for these drivers to be able to see him. But he doesn't do so, is oblivious, just forges ahead and suffers the consequences. So if you had been this driver, then the best thing to do is to wait until your visibility is clear so that you have that clear line of sight of any approaching vehicles. If it's necessary for you to have to progress through the intersection, the best thing to do is to slowly creep through the intersection until the front of your vehicle slowly starts to stick out from beyond this vehicle so that any approaching vehicles can see there's a vehicle starting to creep out into the intersection. Hopefully that makes them more aware of your presence and gives them time to take some sort of avoidance action to give you that space to make it through the intersection. But the best is to rather wait until you can clearly see. In this next animation, what I want to highlight is something which is quite common but catches people out. And that is the rate at which each vehicle approaches the intersection. So the rate that the driver of the red vehicle approaches the intersection and the rate that the driver of the green vehicle approaches the intersection. So each one approaches the intersection at just the exact rate for each driver or vehicle to remain hidden from each other because of this intervening vehicle. So at this point, you can see if you take the line of sight, each vehicle is hidden from the other. As we progress it slightly, again, you take the line of sight, each vehicle hidden from each other, still the same, each vehicle is hidden from each other. Right up to that point, each vehicle still hidden from each other. And so the danger of a scenario such as this is that as a driver is heading towards the intersection, maybe the driver of the red vehicle, as he's approaching the intersection, looks to the left and to the right of this intervening vehicle, doesn't see any other vehicles on the far side, gets a bit closer, still has a look to the left and the right of this intervening vehicle, still no vehicle visible, gets closer, still no vehicle visible, so that by the time he gets to the point of turning through the intersection, he's convinced now there are no vehicles approaching on the far side. In the meantime, it's just coincidence that each vehicle approached the intersection at the rate that they remained in one another's blind spot. And so he just progresses ahead instead of waiting really to check and make sure there's no approaching vehicles, and once again suffers the consequences. So be careful of this scenario where you look out for an approaching vehicle as you're traveling along. It doesn't seem like there's an approaching vehicle, only to find out to your surprise that this vehicle had remained in the blind spot of the intervening vehicle. So something similar that's happening here, intervening vehicle approaching both from this side and that side, remain in one another's blind spots until it's too late and they collide in the middle. Here we have a line of vehicles. So as with the first animation where we have a larger vehicle in the intersection, because we have a line of vehicles in close proximity to one another, they almost serve like an extra large vehicle waiting at the intersection. So for the approaching driver of the red vehicle, he cannot see beyond this line of vehicles to notice any approaching vehicles on the far side. Here we have a nice aerial shot to depict exactly what we saw in the animation. Because of this line of vehicles waiting in the intersection, this driver cannot see this approaching vehicle on the far side. In the next animation, what we have are dual lanes turning left through the intersection. And so just to describe this particular scenario, we have the driver of the white vehicle that approaches the intersection, sees the oncoming vehicle, and so waits in the intersection for this vehicle to pass. However, for the driver of the red vehicle, as he gets closer, because of the presence of the white vehicle, he cannot see beyond this vehicle, doesn't see the approaching green vehicle, and so they collide in the intersection. Now notice he doesn't have that line of sight to this approaching vehicle. While this vehicle's waiting for the driver of the green vehicle to pass, he thinks that it's clear, just forges ahead, and once again a collision. So here we have exactly that scenario, a dual lane of vehicles turning left through the intersection. Now what I want to point out is this vehicle just ahead of the camera. Notice its tinted windows, which makes it now even more difficult to be able to see through these windows for any approaching vehicles. At this point, the driver ahead of the camera can see that there is an approaching vehicle, so he comes to a stop. For the camera, though, he cannot see through the tinted windows. He thinks that it's safe to go because these vehicles ahead of him are going. There you can just see a bit of the headlight shining through the tinted window, but at this stage it's too late and they collide. In the next animation, we've got something similar, excepting the driver of the red vehicles on the far side of the white vehicle, but a similar situation in that the oncoming green vehicle is obscured from the driver of the red vehicle. So the previous one was where the driver of the red vehicle was on the inside lane. Here he is on the outside lane. But likewise, his visibility of the green vehicle is somewhat obscured by this vehicle, and they collide. So here we have the camera approaching the intersection, but just to the right of the camera is a driver in the far lane wanting to cross through the intersection. What I want to point out here, which for the camera is more visible than for this driver, but it's just to show you how to be aware of any approaching vehicles in the intersection. You will have noticed a shadow over here. So if you're at an intersection, something similar to this, and you see a moving shadow, then although you can't see the vehicle behind this truck, you know that there is a vehicle approaching, obviously because of the shadow. So that's a telltale sign. So train yourself to be able to look out for these other signs as to the presence of vehicles that aren't visible to you. For this driver, he cannot see obviously beyond this truck. Instead of acting cautiously, he just forges ahead blindly and suffers the consequences. In the next animation, what we have is once again driver of the red vehicle approaching the intersection. We've got the white vehicle in the intersection. Let's just see what happens. So notice the speeding vehicle coming down the far side. So for the driver of the red vehicle, he may have had a look and seen that it's fairly clear, thinks that it's safe to cross, but because of the speed of the approaching vehicle, he hasn't either taken notice that there is such a vehicle because he had checked maybe in closer proximity to the intersection, and now all of a sudden there's a speeding vehicle that enters into that area, and so he hadn't noticed it, or he miscalculates the speed of the vehicle and so lands up colliding. So this just highlights a very important point, the most important point about intersections, which I've repeated a number of times up until this video, and that is never to approach an intersection at a high speed. That's the worst thing you can do. So we see that in the animation because you're going to catch people out if you're traveling at a high speed, but also the resultant collision is going to be that much more serious as well. There we go. Notice the speed of that black vehicle. In this next animation, what we have is a vehicle that just prior to arriving at the intersection decides to change lanes. So this driver of the blue vehicle, as he gets closer to the intersection, he moves out into the right-hand lane. For the driver of the red vehicle, he may have had a look through the intersection, seen that there's no vehicles in this lane that's approaching the intersection. Maybe he has spotted this driver and realizes that he's in the left lane, and so he's going to slow down, come to a stop behind the white vehicle, but doesn't bank on this driver now changing lanes and progressing through the intersection. Wasn't expecting that, and he now is caught out by surprise. So we see that in this real life clip. We've got a truck that's in the left lane, but as he gets closer to the intersection, decides rather to move into the right lane to bypass this vehicle. These drivers aren't expecting that. Maybe this driver had noted that there aren't vehicles in the right lane, thinks it's clear to go, and then gets caught out by surprise. So this clip also demonstrates a point that I've repeated a few times, and that is never to change lanes just prior to arriving at an intersection. We've seen a few examples of this in previous videos, but this video also demonstrates why not to do that, because it can confuse other motorists. They aren't expecting that. In the next animation, what we have is, once again, which we've covered in a number of other videos, and that is where a driver just blindly follows a driver ahead of him. So what may have happened in this scenario is that because of the rate of the driver of the red vehicle approaching the intersection and the rate of the green vehicle approaching the intersection, this vehicle may have been in the blind spot of the driver of the red vehicle. And so when he gets to the intersection and the driver of the blue vehicle now goes across the intersection, he's even more convinced that there's no approaching vehicles and gets caught in a collision. So just following the driver ahead of him, but could be in the blind spot of the oncoming vehicle, both hidden from each other because of this intervening vehicle, and now collision in the center. In this last animation, what we have are a number of vehicles waiting at an intersection for the traffic light to go green. As they start to pull off, this approaching vehicle now, because of heading towards the intersection at a certain speed, has more movement or motion in going through the intersection. So actually enters into the intersection faster than these vehicles that are waiting to take off from a stationary position, and so catches this driver by surprise. First of all, because his visibility is blocked by these intervening vehicles, but he also doesn't expect that as he now passes through the intersection, that there's suddenly going to be another vehicle that appears in the intersection. So notice this driver is waiting to turn through the intersection. There are some vehicles on the side here waiting to pull off. So as these line of vehicles start to pull off, here's a vehicle that's coming on the close side to the camera at a speed through the intersection and now catches this vehicle by surprise. please like, subscribe, and get notified.